The Callisto Protocol is certainly the Dead Space spiritual successor that we've all been waiting for, though it is far from perfect. While it nails its ambiance, graphics, sound design, and gory gameplay, it fumbles the ending and falls flat with a predictable story, a villain that would be considered bland by B-movie standards, boringly repetitive boss fights, and bullet sponge enemies. Furthermore, I will note that during the review period we had with this game, the PC port was utterly atrocious. Seriously, some of the worst frame hitching and glitching that I've ever seen. I mean, the only thing comparable would probably be Batman Arkham Knight back in 2015. At times, it made the game feel downright unplayable. I mean, just look at this. Now, there was a massive 65 gigabyte day one patch that went up 4 hours before the global release of Callisto Protocol. Right now, I'm recording this video about 3 hours before that global release. Right before I started recording this, I spent about an hour going back through the game from the beginning, getting about an hour into it, trying it with the new patch to see how it holds up, and I'm happy to report it seems as though they fixed almost all of the problems. There's the occasional hitch, but it's nowhere near what it was before. That being said, understand that the gameplay footage you're seeing throughout this video was captured during the review period. As a result, there's gonna be frame hitching, there's gonna be frame drops, there's gonna be stuttering, there's gonna be screen tearing. I wish I could do something about it, but it's beyond my control. They fixed this 4 hours before the global release and also 4 hours before the review embargo lifted. That's right, reviews were allowed to go up the moment the game released and not a moment before. We'll talk about that later because I have some strong thoughts. But all of that to say, this has been a bit of a cluster from the point of view of a reviewer trying to play this game on PC before launch. Thankfully, it seems like they fixed most of these problems, but just understand that's why some of the clips that you'll be seeing have some hitching and glitching and blah, blah, blah. But until we discuss that, sit back, relax, enjoy the video, hit the like button if you enjoy it, subscribe to get notified of new reviews and critiques like this. We have a big critique for this game coming out later this month. So again, subscribe, ring the bell for that. It's basically a longer form review where I go into detail over the course of like an hour and break down every little thing that this game does well and poorly. So again, subscribe for that. But with that, let's get into it. You start the Callisto Protocol as Jacob, a rough and hardened cargo pilot for a transport vessel delivering some mysterious cargo to Black Iron, a maximum security prison on Jupiter's moon Callisto. At Callisto Protocol, the Callisto Protocol. Yeah, you see it? He said the thing. Soon after arriving, inmates begin to transform into mysterious, monstrous creatures, and all heck breaks loose. To make it out alive, Jacob must fight through hordes of hideous infected while discovering what caused the outbreak and what, if anything, can be done to stop it. And while the story isn't massive, timing out to just over 10 hours in my first playthrough on the medium difficulty setting, it feels well-paced and it doesn't overstay its welcome, something crucial in intense survival action games like this. You'll notice also I said survival action instead of survival horror, which is what this game has been branded as. And well, that's because the game really isn't very scary, something that I actually consider pretty important in a survival horror game. While the enemy designs are grotesque, certainly, and the high fidelity graphics help bring everything to life, with the subsurface scattering making everything pop more than any other game in recent memory, this game leans a lot more into the action side of its design predilections than the horror. And personally, I don't see this as a bad thing. I, for one, am sick and tired of the cheap jump scares that plague modern horror games. It's lazy in my mind, and I don't find it very entertaining. I just find it miserable. But I say all of this because I think it's important to note that if horror tends to turn you off, don't look past this game because it's actually far more action thriller than it is horror. There is the occasional jump scare, but they're few and far between. And even then, it doesn't feel cheap. It feels like, I could have seen that coming. You know, that kind of thing. Over the course of the campaign, you'll explore an assortment of areas of the prison, each feeling fairly unique while still being, well, parts of a prison. The environmental design is top-notch, and I always enjoyed looking around and taking in the horrid, sticky, smelly sights. There was always something interesting to see, and I expect that on subsequent playthroughs, there will be all sorts of little details that I notice that I didn't pick up on before. This really is a beautifully designed and conceptualized game, and it almost without a doubt will be nominated for Artistic Design Awards. Deservedly, might I add. And all of this is compounded with the great sound design, the moving score, and the tremendous performances by the entire cast. I think it's probably a mixture of the tremendous voice acting and the talent that they have behind the motion capture suits, and then also the high fidelity rendering and subsurface scattering and facial rigs and everything else they did in this game. But it truly is one of the most immersive survival, horror, action, whatever games that I've ever played. It really is that impressive. But when you're not taking in the sights and smelling the funk in these corridors, you're probably fighting monsters. Here, the Dead Space inspirations are very clear, with the core device on Jacob's neck offering a constant notification in-game of health and the capacity for using your grip ability. More on that in a second. This means that the heads-up display is always extremely minimalistic, which is, in my view, a really good thing. It helps you get more immersed in this world, and it doesn't feel as though you're getting an unfair advantage, one that Jacob doesn't have. Combat itself is straightforward, with an assortment of weapons that are introduced at a steady pace. Each feels punchy and viable, from the pistol all the way up to the assault rifle that you unlock in the final act of the game. Each given combat encounter is more simple than I personally expected, however, with it mainly consisting of a simple dodging system where you lean away from incoming attacks by alternating which direction you're strafing. You then follow this up with a quick melee attack or a shot from one of your various 3D printed weapons, or you can use your grip ability, which allows you to grab and throw infected into turbines, fans, each other, or simply off of ledges. Furthermore, you can pick up these canisters and throw them into particularly brutish enemies for massive damage, so long as you're not standing too close. And this can be really useful as a tool in hectic moments when you're being swarmed. And since the annihilation of the body of the enemy means that you can't stomp and loot them a la Dead Space, there's a constant consideration of whether or not you can stand to lose the loot for sake of an easier time clearing out a room full of enemies. The whole combat system is responsive, crunchy, and most importantly, it's fun. I found myself excited every time I came into a room full of enemies that I could pwn. Yeah, it's 2022. I just used the word pwn. What are you going to do about it? I will say this occasionally came back to bite me, however, because the game sprinkles in mandatory stealth sections where a room full of blind infected mandates walking slowly while crouched in order to progress. While one may be able to fight their way through these arenas on the easiest difficulty setting, I don't know, I haven't tried it. On medium and hard, which I did try, you literally cannot carry enough ammunition to clear out all of these enemies. You have to stealth your way through. Fortunately, these moments are very rare in the game, and the developers welcome you to revel in the gory and messy combat the majority of the time. As the game goes on, the infected will evolve along your weapons that you upgrade using Callisto credits you loot in the game's interiors, hidden around corners, and within crates and craniums. This means that the combat is always challenging, if not fairly repetitive by the end. In fact, the boss fights that bookend each chapter of the game are often the least exciting part of the chapter, since they exclusively consist of dodging a flurry of swings, shooting or whacking them a few times, and then repeating as you dance across the arena. It isn't hard, it's barely engaging, and it certainly isn't fun. Sometimes there are things you can use your grip on to throw or destroy to keep things interesting, but those moments are few and far between, and unfortunately don't do much to save these monotonous and often disappointing encounters. Now, while I can certainly understand that it's a lot easier said than done to just make better boss fights, it is very frustrating that I looked forward to fighting the grunt enemies far more than the big bosses that have the high production values and the cool intro cinematics. Pretty much every single boss boiled down to the exact same gameplay approach. There was almost nothing unique about each encounter, and it was really underwhelming. One thing that wasn't underwhelming were each of the finishers each time Jacob gets killed. These things are graphic, gory, and gushy. I don't think I can actually show these on YouTube without being like full on you know, flagged for all eternity. So I'm just going to play it safe, but you can look them up if you want. They are horrifying at times, and there are some finishers which are unique to certain late game enemies which are just as satisfying as they are horrifying. So just buckle up for that. Now, as for the story, it's nothing to write home about. Jacob is interesting as a character, and all of the actors do a stellar job, as I mentioned before. The problem is with the writing and the rushed plot. While Jacob is sympathetic and has a character arc to speak of, everyone else in the cast is underdeveloped, lacking any sort of likable traits, and if I weren't taking notes while playing, I don't think I would have remembered any of their names. It really feels like the writers just assumed that we already knew who these people were, so they didn't bother giving us any sort of sorted introduction. It certainly makes sense in the context of the story that these characters don't have time to get to know each other, but the effect on the player is that the only emotion they have when a key character is killed off is pure unadulterated apathy. More dialogue and interactions could greatly help, even if it's just over the radio while exploring and navigating levels akin to something like we saw in BioShock. But unfortunately, those moments of exposition and bonding are few and far between. In addition to all of this, the main antagonist of the story is frustratingly unidimensional, uninteresting, and it's all the more frustrating that they leave this whole plot on a major cliffhanger, I guess baiting a sequel or maybe a big DLC expansion, even though it feels as though it directly contradicts what it sets as its overarching premise for the story. Honestly, I can't help but feel as though they seriously dropped the ball right on the 1 yard line. They get so close to tying everything up in a nice bow and then just walking away, and then they just screw it up. But all told, the Callisto Protocol is a visceral and really fun action adventure. It's in many ways exactly what I was hoping it would be. And here comes the slightly awkward, unscripted section of the video where I just need to talk directly about this because I do consider this a pretty serious matter. Whenever a game publisher waits until the last possible, literally the last possible moment to release reviews for their game, you should be looking at that with skeptical hippo eyes, because that is a major red flag, red flag, red flag. Yes, I bought a red flag for YouTube videos. You know, one of the best expenses I've made on this channel. Because you have to ask yourself, why would the publisher not want players to know what reviewers have to say until the game is all ready for sale? It's extremely concerning, and it's strange because the Callisto Protocol, from what I have played, is really fun. It's really good, and I can recommend it happily so long as it's stable. I haven't tried it on PlayStation 5. We'll be doing that the day that this review goes up over on Luke Stevens Live, my second channel, which I'll have linked in the description box below the like button. But after seeing this last-minute patch on Steam that apparently fixes the game and makes it actually playable, I still think that the game is worth playing, and I would recommend it to anybody who thinks that this looks even moderately interesting, so long as you understand that it's only 10 hours long, despite the publisher and developers saying that it's between 12 and 14. I explored like every corridor. I maximally upgraded multiple weapons. I didn't have trouble or get stuck in the game, and all told, I really don't know how you would stretch this to 14 hours without playing on like super hard and also kind of sucking at the game. I'm seriously like confused. But you know what? To each their own. The point of all of this is just to say that I do not want to see this be a precedent where publishers withhold reviews from consumers until it's effectively too late, until their pre-orders have already been fulfilled. Because as far as I can tell, what happened is that Krafton knew that the patch to fix Callisto Protocol on PC was going to come down to the last few hours. They weren't sure if it was going to get out, and so they decided to delay reviews until the last possible moment so that reviewers wouldn't come out and say, hey, the PC port's broken, don't buy it. So they waited. And now it puts reviewers in an awkward position where we are kind of assuming, based on this patch and an hour of game time with it, that it seems to have fixed the problem. But there is no physical way that we could possibly play through the game in its entirety in the finished state that will go out to consumers. And the thing that makes it all the more baffling is that it's going to hurt the Callisto Protocol more than if they just were like honest and direct and say, hey, listen guys, we have a day one patch going up. It's going to be last minute, but it's going to fix everything. If they just said that, we would have been cool. But instead they wait all this time, and now reviewers are going to be putting up reviews on this launch day saying, hey, the PC port's broken, because they didn't try this patch that went up 3 hours before launch. Because why would they assume that 3 hours before launch everything will be fixed? That's insane. The whole thing is just really, really weird. But if you're looking to play the Callisto Protocol on PC, the thing to know is that this massive 65 gigabyte patch that they put up 3 to 4 hours before launch seems to have fixed the hitching issue, which was probably tied to a shader caching issue similar to the issues we had with Gotham Knights just a few months ago. Throughout my first playthrough without that major patch, the game ran terribly on my 3080 and 5950X running off of an NVMe SSD. And after this patch, I'm playing on Ultra with ray tracing and the AMD FSR, whatever upscaling thing set to quality, and I'm getting a solid 40 to 45 frames. And when I turn off ray tracing, I'm sitting up closer to 90. All of this to say, I really like the Callisto Protocol. I'm happy to recommend it. I don't know what it's like on old gen consoles like the PS4 and Xbox One. So if you're looking to purchase it for one of those consoles, I would certainly look up specific footage of what the game looks like running on those platforms before you buy it. If they were this kind of like mysterious and secretive with the PC port, I can only imagine that there might be some concerning performance stats on those base consoles. So definitely do your homework. But all told, the game is good, the game is fun, and when it works properly, I think I can easily recommend it. But that's it for me. Thank you for watching. I'm gonna go get some sleep because I've been sprinting through this game for the last 24 hours because once again they gave it to me like a day and a half before the embargo lifted. So in some ways I'm kind of thankful that the game ended up being shorter than they predicted, but you know, what are you gonna do? I swear at this point it's like an inside joke between these publishers. I swear, because like God of War, they sent me the review code like a day before the embargo, so I ended up putting the review up like days after everybody else. And same with like Evil West, I got the review codes late for all of those. It's just, at this point they're teasing me, they're mocking me. I know it. But thank you for watching. Again, I'm live over on Luke Stevens Live right now, my second channel. Just search in the YouTube search bar Luke Stevens Live, you'll find me, or links in the description box. If you have any questions about the Callisto Protocol as well that didn't get answered in this review, or anybody else's that you've seen, come over, ask the question in chat, I'd be happy to answer. But with that, much love. I'll see you over on the live stream or in the next video, whatever comes first. Much love, I'll see you then, bye-bye.